Today we're talking heat training, what it's doing to your body, how you can adapt to it, and how it can also be good for you. So it's getting to be that time of year where, for a lot of us, it's going to be pretty dang hot outside. Right now, as we speak, it's 95 degrees here where I'm at, and it's not going to be uncommon to see days that are 20 degrees warmer. Not every place is going to be that hot, but a lot of places are going to be pretty hot, and it's unavoidable this time of year. This video is going to give you some insights on how to go about training in that kind of an environment. So let's look at what's happening in your body when you're running when it's hot or humid outside. Any exercise you do will generate heat no matter what. The more intense or the longer you go, the more heat it's going to generate. Just going for a walk around the block is going to generate less heat than going for a long tempo. So when you're out training, heat and humidity are an extra stressor on top of the heat that you generate naturally. So as your core temperature rises more and more, as it starts to get to a certain point, like your body and your brain is gonna see that and can even like predict like where it's going, and at that point start to try to shut you down to prevent that core temperature from getting to a level where you're gonna pass out or even like die. So the way it protects itself is just making you feel not good. Your perceived fatigue is going to be quite high. You'll get lightheaded. You will have to slow down. It's just your body's way of protecting itself. One of the main things that's happening when it's hot outside that is affecting your running performance is the blood will go to the skin to kind of activate sweat glands and act as a way to cool you down, but that blood becomes unavailable for the exercise tasks that you maybe want to use it for. And that reason is kind of why some people call heat training the poor man's altitude. There are some similar benefits that you get from running in the heat that you get also running at altitude. The biggest thing is that you're able to run slower, like less impact on your legs, your muscles, your neuromuscular system, but get a higher stimulus for your cardiovascular aerobic system. At altitude, there's less oxygen available just in the atmosphere in general. The air pressure is lower. So, like say you were running at a constant effort, that effort at altitude would be slower than at sea level. But heat training is the same way, but instead of a lack of oxygen in the air itself, the lack of oxygen comes from your blood being used, like I mentioned earlier, to go to the skin to cool you down. That's blood that normally could carry oxygen to your muscles that's not available, so the supply of oxygen to your muscles is less, just like at altitude, but for different reasons. And like altitude, because of that, on the high end of things, you're not going to be able to run as fast. When you race at altitude, you get an altitude conversion. There are no heat conversions, but the reality is if it's really hot out, that you're going to be working out or racing slower. And something to keep in mind when you're working out or racing at heat, like at altitude, is it's going to be more taxing on you. It's going to be more of a stress on your body, so you're going to have to balance that out with more or longer recovery. So how do you adapt to heat training? Well, also, like altitude, it's going to take some time, typically about 2 to 3 weeks before you're actually adapted to it. Those first 2 to 3 weeks, you might feel like absolute garbage as your body is adjusting. But if you do go into a hot environment for the first time, the same way as like if you go to altitude for the first time, there's a period of a couple days where your body's kind of overcompensating for like the new stress that it's under. It's kind of beefing up its systems a little bit to try to deal with that. But that can only last a couple days, usually like 3 days or so before reality sets in. It actually has to adapt to the new environment that it's in. So if you're in a hot environment for the first time, or it's just starting to get hot again after springtime is over, in that period of adjustment, and really just in general, you're going to have to go slower. And like we talked about, going slower can still get you the same training benefit as going faster in normal conditions. But going slower as you're adapting to heat will allow you to get used to it and not overtrain yourself, overexert yourself, not hurt your recovery at all. So when it comes to dealing with the heat, there's only 4 ways to lose heat from your body, and 3 of them are all dependent on the surrounding environment being at a cooler temperature than your body itself. So radiation, skin temperature is higher than the surroundings, and heat radiates out. Convection is transfer of heat via direct contact with materials or things, and that's only 3% of heat loss. And convection is transfer of heat to air or water and accounts for 12% of heat loss. Heat travels in the blood from the core of the body to the skin, which allows the heat to be lost and escape into the air. And what's nice about this is it's not just skin surface temperature, but it's heat from the core of your body is able to escape. And then lastly is evaporation, which is not as dependent on a temperature gradient, but it depends on sweat being able to evaporate off your body and cool your skin temperature. And this counts for about 25% of heat loss. The tricky thing with evaporation is if you're in a very humid environment and sweat's not able to evaporate very much, then you're kind of just cooking yourself in warm sweat all over your body. That's why humidity doesn't feel very good. And we couldn't talk about dealing with heat without talking about hydration. So when it comes to the amount that you should hydrate, a good rule of thumb is half your body weight in ounces as a baseline. So that would mean like if you weighed 140 pounds, divided by 2 is 70, so that's 70 ounces. But like that is not just what you should do, that is a bare minimum baseline just for existing. Like if you sat on your couch in the air conditioning all day, that would be fine. But if you're watching this video, you're probably doing some serious training, so you're going to need a lot more than that. You're looking at an additional 3 to 8 fluid ounces for every 15 minutes that you're exercising. And especially in the hot and the heat this time of year, I'd probably lean towards that upper end, 8 ounces for every 15 minutes. So let's say you're that 140-pound person drinking 70 ounces just to exist, and you want to go run for an hour in the heat. That's 8 ounces every 15 minutes, 32 ounces. So just from that one bit of exercise, your water consumption is up almost 50% from baseline. And for reference, I know everybody loves the Stanleys. These are supposed to be 40 ounces. So if you're exercising for a little more than an hour, you should be replacing it with at least one of these. And another thing to keep in mind is that it's not just water that's important. You need to be getting electrolytes in there as well. That's going to help with all sorts of things. That's going to help a lot with things like muscle activation and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole lot of detail we could go into that, but I'm not going to do that right now. Just know that electrolytes, the 2 biggest ones, sodium and potassium, like needs to be part of that hydration as well. Whether that's in fluids like sports drinks, or whether you're getting that in elsewhere with like food and stuff. I remember we had a race afternoon once, and I was in school drinking a lot of water, and instead of Gatorade, I just had pretzels with my water, like salt and sodium, getting it in that way. So wherever you find a way to get it in, just make sure you get it in. And one of the most important points with hydration is the fact that it needs to be a continuous process. It's not something you can do right before your run. If you're waiting until right before your run to chug a water bottle, that's too late. You need to be constantly keeping up with that. The day of or the morning of something is too late. You know, I can say from experience, I've been on the very bad side of dehydration that ended up with me on the ground after a race, going to the hospital, getting an IV. It was not fun, so definitely take care of your hydration. All the other stuff with heat training doesn't matter if you're not able to take care of that. And an inevitability for a lot of us at some point is going to be racing in the heat. Optimal racing temperature is going to be in the 40s or 50s, and every little bit that you go above that, your performance is going to decrease. Race paces will slow down the higher the temperature gets, but also the longer the race gets. Like if you race a marathon in 90-degree weather, it's going to affect you a lot more than running an 800 in 90-degree weather. So you're going to have to know your race and be ready for the different challenges. If you can adapt to heat before your race, like in the weeks leading up to it, and kind of decrease that slowing down, and you'll be able to be more resilient. And with that, if you are going to be racing in the heat, if you've got a hot environment, then just take advantage of that. But if you live somewhere cool and you're going to race somewhere hot, there's all sorts of creative ways people have tried to do that. People will layer up even when it's not cold outside. I've heard of people having a treadmill in their garage and they would get a space heater running while they were on the treadmill. Whatever it takes to get them ready to run and compete in a hot environment and try to be more resilient than their competition. But on the day of, it's the opposite. You want to take advantage of the cooling methods, like take advantage of that temperature gradient, get cold substances on you. Like people have gloves with ice cubes in them and like hats with ice that melts down. One of my favorites before race is to soak your singlet with cold water, and that'll act as like a temperature gradient. Like the singlet's going to be colder than your skin temperature. You'll lose heat that way. But also as the race gets going and that water evaporates, it's kind of like a bonus on top of the normal sweating that you do. It feels pretty nice. It's like whatever you can do, get creative with ice cubes or like anything cold that you can find before a race, anything that can help delay that process, delay that mode of panic that your body gets into when it has to deal with really hot conditions. And capping it off, looking at like extreme heat and extreme humidity. In a situation like that, if it's very hot and very humid, like we talked about, like all of these cooling methods might not work at all. It might be too hot for any heat to escape out from your body. It might be too humid for sweat to evaporate at all. At that point, you're really just going to have to slow down, make sure you're very well pre-hydrated, and just be careful. One of the telltale signs things is going really wrong is if you suddenly stop sweating, which means that your body's basically out of fluids. And if you keep going at that point, you risk like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, getting into the hospital. Some people have died from heat exposure. So just be careful. Your life isn't worth the extra last 2 miles of your 10-mile run or whatever. Just take care of yourself. And some other recommendations to kind of cope with it. If you can go, even if it's hot, if you can avoid like high UV times a day, it'll lessen the kind of heat feel of it. If you can run right around sunrise, that's going to be the coolest part of the day. Unfortunately, like when we get deep into summer here in like Phoenix, like the coolest part of the day can still be 90 degrees, but you take what you can get. And then after sunset as well, the air temperature is going to be hot, but the UV radiation is going to be low. Just makes it feel a lot better. Like I'd rather run in 100 degrees after the sun's down than 90 degrees in the middle of the day. If you can avoid that like middle part of the day where the sun's beaten down, That'll be good for you. Of course, there's always the treadmill or like indoor running tracks that they might have at like gyms if things are just stupid hot. I know last year I got on the treadmill for some of my like threshold type workouts because it was about 110 on like a daily basis for quite a while, and I didn't want to push that. Like if you've got options to cool yourself down, take them. And it might not be the funnest thing in the world, but like I said, you can get some benefit of it if you're able to be smart with it, be prepared the right way, properly hydrated, not overdoing it once you are out in the heat. Um, Even though it sucks, it can be an advantage. And then once that cool weather finally does come eventually, or you go travel to a race and the heat's not there, it can be like a 100-pound weight gets lifted off your shoulders. Magically, you'll feel so much better. That fitness is there when you're building it in the heat, even if you can't see it yet. So yeah, with heat training, kind of just have to embrace the suck a little bit.